everyone, and welcome once again to the vast and ominous comic book vault. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
Dan, are you ready to talk some Ultimate Spider-Man?
I'm ready. I'm always ready to talk Spider-Man anything, so...
So, we are up to 13 issues in Ultimate Spider-Man. I keep calling this Ultimate Spider-Man, but of course it's Ultimate Comics All-New Spider-Man. And
Ultimate All-New Spider-Man.
Ultimate All-New Ultimate Spider Ultimate Man. And this is, of course, Miles Morales. And Dan and I haven't taken the time to talk about any of this yet. Mostly because we couldn't find a good stopping place, because it's not really in arcs yet. It's kind of an arc that just keeps on going and is not even really over yet. But with this new event starting, I thought maybe this would be the place to go ahead and get some of these knocked out. And this may be a slightly longer video than what Dan and I usually do, because this is 13 issues, and I imagine we'll have quite a bit to say about this. Dan, before we get rolling, first of all, you were reading Ultimate before this, right?
Yeah, I've read all of it. So.
Okay, and I haven't. This was my starting point actually for Ultimate.
Oh, nice.
Because you know, it was a new Spider-Man. Peter Parker just died. It was new #1, and everybody was talking about it. And I thought I'll give it a shot. And I wanted to, I did the same thing with this that I did with the Harry Potter movies. At one point with the Harry Potter books, I just stopped reading them.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see if the movies would hold up without them. And because I like the idea of things kind of standing on their own, yeah. And I sort of had this with this. Bendis and everybody behind Ultimate was saying this is a book that you can read without reading anything from before it, and I was like, I'll take that challenge. And so I started reading it without reading the rest of Ultimate. As I started to get into this, I did go back and read a couple Ultimate trades, and I gotta say it does hold up just fine by itself.
I think it does as well. I think that I would, in good faith, give this to someone who hasn't read any Ultimate before, and they'd be able to understand it perfectly fine. I mean, it lays everything on the table that you would need to know going in. All you need to know is Peter Parker's dead. That's about it.
And now I got to ask you, since I didn't read them, how did you feel about the death of Peter Parker, and did you see it as a publicity stunt like other people did?
I thought it was definitely a publicity stunt because Bendis was in the middle of an arc and everything was dropped. And they did the death thing. They were doing a bunch of stuff with Mysterio, and now all that stuff was dropped, and now he's sort of picking it back up in Spider-Man, sort of, even though nothing's happening in that book. But I definitely think that this was something that was not necessarily Bendis' idea. I mean, I can see that he's sort of enthusiastic about the idea of doing New Spider-Man because this book is good, but I'm not so sure if it was his idea initially to change it.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because he sure doesn't talk about it like that.
No, he doesn't.
When you hear him talk in interviews and in the letters he sure acts like this was planned well in advance, and well, honestly, to be fair, I think I heard that more from Quesada than I did from him, but
yeah, I wouldn't doubt that if Bendis maybe had a plan to kill Spider-Man off sometime in his Ultimate run, because I think one of the problems with Spider-Man just as a concept is that it doesn't have any finite ending, because it's such a story about chronicling someone growing up and maturing, and it not having an end to that has forced them to sort of retread the same character arcs for that character, especially recently.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I can see that Bendis being like, okay, since I'm in my own universe, I can kill Peter off, I can end his story and bring in someone new if they still want to let me keep writing this book and it's still relevant, people keep buying it. But I don't think it was his decision necessarily to kill him off as a teenager, because I feel like, I at least like adult Peter Parker, but I don't know. I feel like the point of this Ultimate book is to distinguish itself from the 616, where you want a teenage Peter Parker in here, so maybe that was a good decision to get rid of Peter before he sort of became an adult.
You just would have liked to have seen them finish what they were doing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. One of the problems that I have with this new character, probably one of the only ones, is I think they made him a little bit too young. I think he's written a little bit more developed than a 13-year-old It should be. I don't know.
Did you feel that way about it? Because I was kind of okay with that.
You did?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought about that a little bit, but he's not like an uber genius. Like, it could have been a lot further than it is.
I just meant sort of like emotional maturity. Like, I don't know, like I was a lot more immature than this kid when I was 13. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I kind of feel like I do feel like 13 is in our technological age a little different than it was when I was 13.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, obviously, because I'm not currently 13, but, I mean, you know, maybe you're right about emotional maturity. I mean, I do think that as far as, like vocabulary and, like, the kinds of things that he seems interested in and that sort of stuff, that all seems kind of spot on to me. And the other thing, too, that you gotta think about is, I think that Bendis kind of purposefully, put him in a bad neighborhood so that he could get away with giving him that kind of maturity.
Yeah, that's true.
So that he would maybe grow up with some stuff. I mean, like, I'm not sure really, we haven't really seen him talk about going through any, like, really bad stuff in his childhood or whatever, but they do talk about, like they live in a cesspool and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that they never thought that he'd get into that school, and he seems pretty, I don't know, he seemed pretty down about everything before he got into that school. Like, he was afraid that he had no future and that kind of thing. Oh, and this goes without saying, but of course we're gonna do spoilers in this because we're gonna talk about this at length. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking when you were talking about the fact that he lived in a cesspool and how we were talking about his age before too. I'm not sure, I can't really remember how the other Ultimate book went, but if this is going to play out like the old Spider-Man comics, which I assume probably they will because it's Ultimate, this could be every year that the book's going on, Miles gets older a year. So maybe he's putting him at 13 so we can have him as a teenager for a while and age him in real time.
Yeah, but he's going to have to start picking up the stories faster.
Yeah.
Because I don't see more than a couple of weeks going by in the first 13 issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unclear as to how the time is going here.
It sure doesn't seem like very much time could have passed at all, though, right?
You're right. And let's get right into that. I mean, that's one of the criticisms I think that we both had with this is this could have been told in less issues. I think.
I'll say this. It could have been told in less issues. I kind of, reading it all together, and I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself from back when we reviewed the first arc of Ninja Turtles, because I had a similar thing with this, but honestly for totally different reasons. Because that book, it wasn't because not enough happened in an issue, it was because it was setting up too much stuff.
Yeah.
It felt like that at first with that book, but then I realized it was because there were so many subplots going on. This is not like that. This has 0 subplots. Right? I mean, like, or rather, the subplots that it does have converge.
Because you have that little...
Prowler does run off and do stuff with Scorpion, but...
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
So, sorry.
No, that's all right.
But anyway, when you're not in the same room, it's kind of, conversations get different.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's not real dense with material, but what I like about it, reading it all together, that I didn't enjoy month to month, and people have said this about Bendis, that Bendis, for the most part, is very difficult to read month to month, and he reads a lot better in trade. This is the epitome of that, because by stretching it out the way he has, it really does allow for a lot of detail and a lot of what's the word I was looking for? It's and a lot of atmosphere, really. I don't know what you think about that, but I just like the characters are more real to me because it takes its time.
Yeah,
but at the same time, it makes me wonder if it's worth $4 an issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I really liked about Ultimate Spider-Man, whereas he takes the time to sort of do those small moments with the characters, and you get to know them a lot better than you would have in an action-oriented story. I mean, Bendis is a very dialogue-heavy guy, and some people enjoy that, some people don't. I enjoy it in the context of this, when he's able to focus on a finite cast of characters, and he can have a different voice for all of them. I really like when he does stuff like that. Avengers is different. because everyone seems to sound the same to me, and there's too many characters, and none of them do anything except for like 4 of them. But
yeah, and people in this do seem to have their own voices.
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone in here, I feel like Bendis planned out to take Peter Parker's origin story and turn absolutely everything on its head.
Yes.
And
I wanted to get
everyone
into
seems
that.
to have a very specific purpose in this story, and I really enjoy that. Like, I mean, the obvious one is with his uncle being a bad guy, but, I mean, you have his uncle supposedly almost die in here, and that makes him not have thoughts about not being Spider-Man, which I thought was really interesting, you know? And Bendis does it in such a way where it doesn't feel like it's a gimmicky thing where he's just like, hey, look, this is what happened to Peter Parker. I'm going to do the opposite of it. It's very organic, you know what I mean?
It is, yeah, that's a great word for it. You're absolutely right. And what's really cool about that, too, is that, and everybody keep in mind, if you haven't read this, this is really recent. We're talking issue 12 into 13.
Yeah.
When the Prowler dies, and what's really interesting, or the Prowler seems to die. I don't think we can be entirely sure that he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really like about it is that not only does Miles seem to have been responsible, but he's responsible for it because he was being responsible. Not because he was being irresponsible like Peter Parker was. So Peter Parker is somewhat responsible for his uncle's death. That propels him into trying to do the right thing after that, which inherently ends up being to use his powers for good and become Spider-Man. In this guy is using his powers for good. He seems to have maybe killed his uncle because his uncle was a bad guy and was trying to make him do bad things to be an enforcer, as his roommate says.
Mm-hmm.
And then he decides that maybe he's actually doing the wrong thing by being Spider-Man, all while he's trying to be responsible. So yeah, it's the exact opposite, and yet it doesn't feel forced or contrived, really.
Right, and
I think it's cleverly the opposite.
it is very clever. It's very well done, and all the stuff you were talking about responsibility before, I mean, that is sort of, obviously, with all good Spider-Man stories, that's the main thrust of the themes they're playing with here. And I really like how Bendis is doing it, because he's sort of, with Spider-Man before, it's sort of always a given that the fact that Peter's going out and using his powers to fight crime is a responsible thing. But in here, Bendis is sort of asking, well, what does responsibility mean in, like, someone's life, you know, like just the life of a regular guy? Is he obligated to be responsible for himself, like to his family, like his dad talks about all the time, where he's talking about how the superheroes are just running around doing whatever the hell they want, and that's how he perceives them? Or is it you have to be responsible towards some greater good? And I really like seeing Miles struggle with that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I love that being tackled in Ultimate as opposed to 616.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the Stan Lee days, it was really sophisticated for its time in comic books, but still somewhat simplified naturally.
Right.
As far as, I mean, maybe them's fighting words to Dan, because I know Dan loves Stan Lee Spider-Man, and so do I. But all I mean by that is, I think Stan Lee kind of sees it as a given that if you have superpowers and you were to just use them for the right reasons, you would pretty much inherently win.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'd do the right thing and you'd win.
Right.
And in this, it tries to be a little bit more realistic, which is what Ultimate has generally been. And again, having not read a ton of Ultimate, it seems like that's generally been its purpose, to kind of handle these sorts of things in a bit more of an updated, real-world sort of way. And without going so far that it can't also be fun and escapist sometimes. Mm-hmm. And what I like about this is it isn't just like you were saying, like does he just have a responsibility to his parents or to a greater good, but also does he have a responsibility to, I don't know, learn what his powers are before he tries to use them, to get some training, to make sure that he understands what all of his senses are before he tries to use them. I really like that he doesn't even realize he has spider sense until after his first fight.
Right, yeah.
And things like that.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't understand how to turn his invisibility on and off. It takes him a while to figure out what his Venom Blast does.
Yeah.
That he has to fire it, and it takes a little bit, and then it explodes. Mm-hmm. And things like that. And he kind of gets this idea from Gwen at the funeral when she drops, with great power comes great responsibility, on him. Mm-hmm. Which, I don't know, could have been cheesier than it was. she drops that on him, and then he thinks, well, wow, maybe I'm destined to be Spider-Man. And things don't go all that well for him right out the gate because he doesn't know anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I really like that part of the character too, where he's just sort of in way over his head, and that makes it really easy to root for him because he's a good kid. I mean, he's sort of the opposite of Peter Parker, like we were talking about before, where Peter Parker was sort of what the Prowler is. He's a guy that feels like society owed him something, and he doesn't have to be responsible. And then Peter Parker had that moment where his world was rocked, obviously, and the Prowler never had that. And Miles is the opposite of that. He's sort of like, well, he had that sort of responsibility in him from the beginning, and it's just seeing this kid that's in way over his head trying to do something good. It's easy to root for him and easy to be invested in the character. Bendis made this character, or designed him very accessibly, I think. I think he's very relatable in a way that Peter Parker isn't, but that's not to say that Peter Parker isn't relatable either. They're relatable for different reasons. I mean, Miles is in a completely different position than Peter Parker. Like you said, he's in a poor family. He's struggling to even get in a school. I mean,
he's younger.
Yeah, Peter Parker was always like, he lived in Forest Hills, Queens, and that was like a good area of New York in the 60s, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah,
and they always kind of act like the public school there was good. And...
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting to see a kid taken from a more realistic urban area of our time. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and what's really nice is that even though he's from kind of a poor family and he's in sort of this urban neighborhood, I don't feel like Bendis plays it as too stereotypical because of his race.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it really does feel just circumstantial. I really like that race doesn't come into it very much, except for with the Prowler, which kind of makes sense because since he's got this kind of the world owes me something sort of thing. It sort of makes sense that he would drop phrases like the white Spider-Man,
right,
and stuff like that. Like I buy that with his character. And again, I don't feel like that's Bendis playing the race card. I feel like because of the kind of guy he is, maybe that guy would play the race card. I feel like Bendis does a really good job of making it about the characters.
Yeah, exactly. A good example of that. I think
I'm not paying attention to race in this book.
Yeah, me either. Like, if someone didn't tell me that Miles' mother was of Hispanic or Latin descent, I wouldn't have known it. I mean, she's a great character.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought
she's
just
half
great,
Hispanic, half black. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I think that one of the most, and tell me if you agree with this, I think one of the most sophisticated things that Bendis does in this, and this is a really small line that I'm going to talk about because I have a tendency to do that. Pick a line of dialogue and pick it apart. There's this bit where his uncle Aaron, and again, as we were talking about, obviously flipping things on its head because it's his uncle, and he's kind of so far his big bad guy, whereas Peter Parker's uncle was the thing that made him become Spider-Man after he died. Bendis has this place toward the end of their confrontation in 11, I think, where it's 10 or 11, where Uncle Aaron says, "You have a responsibility to me."
Mm-hmm.
And I love that line. It's really cool that that's there because Miles has been hearing about responsibility. He's been thinking about responsibility, and the best juxtaposition between Uncle Ben and Uncle Aaron is you have a responsibility to the world, to the truth, versus you have a responsibility to me.
Yeah, and that's totally how, if Uncle Ben was an evil bastard, he would play it off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting too. That when you were talking about the line when he was talking, it reminded me of at the beginning, and this is another line of dialogue that I think is probably going to become Miles's. With great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Aaron was talking about how if you to succeed in the world, you need to look at it and sort of shape it the way you want it to. You want it to look. And obviously in Uncle Aaron's mind, that's just do whatever you want, take anything from anyone. But you can take that quote and make it inspirational. For Miles, you can be like, okay, you see something you don't like, go change it, you know?
Well, and what I love is that even though Aaron is all about himself, and I think that Miles' father is right when he says he doesn't have an understanding of what right and wrong is, even though he's like that, Bendis does such a good job of making him a real person just like everyone else. I love the flashback of them watching old Jackie Chan movies together.
Yeah, that was awesome.
There's just these great nuances, and again, I think that's probably the biggest argument for this format of taking its time so much, is that you wouldn't have room for that kind of stuff, and they become real characters, and they're not just they're not just black and white people. I mean, they have even Uncle Aaron, they have dimension to them.
Right, and I feel like when you're reading the book and you see the little moments like that, with him and Uncle Aaron, you feel that Uncle Aaron and Miles really do have a love for each other, and it's so, like...
When they say that, it's genuine.
Yeah, and it's so... Like, even during the fights, Miles was like, I love you, like, we need to stop this right now.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do that.
Right.
I'm going to take up for the age thing.
Yeah.
I really am, and I don't mean to belabor this, but I just thought of a couple things while we were talking about it. I think 13 is really good here for a couple reasons. It's dangerous because it's so young. But what's really good about it, to me, the biggest thing, is that it makes me buy Uncle Aaron thinking he can push him around more.
Yeah, that's true.
That would be a little bit harder were he a little bit older and were he closer to the age he'd be when he moved out of his parents' house or something. I mean, Uncle Aaron really takes ownership, and I mean, part of that, of course, is because it was his spider, or at least the spider he accidentally brought home from Oscorp. Right. And so, he has this I made you, I can break you attitude, which would work fine if he was 16 or 17, I suppose. But being 13, I mean, he expects that he can get Miles to do anything he wants because Miles is just a nothing kid that doesn't understand how anything works. And so he can scare him into saying things like, I'll go tell your dad and stuff like that. He's a bully, and there are extended relatives that do this to little kids, And I mean, I'm not calling 13 a little kid, but you know what I mean. And the other thing, too, is 13, you can totally buy more of the stupid stuff Miles does. Like, when he makes idiot kind of mistakes, you go, well, he's just 13.
Yeah. He's just being naive.
He's being naive, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The more we talk about it, I'm sort of starting to come around on it, too.
Maybe a greater sense of morality, but not necessarily street smarts. I get the sense that, and I think that that's a testament to his parents. And one thing I like is that he's got good parents. You never have superheroes with two good parents. Like, that never happens. Very rarely. And it's kind of neat that he gets to be the superhero that doesn't have the same kind of tragic backstory everybody has. He's molding his own tragic backstory. It's almost as if, like getting superpowers was, and I guess Peter Parker has that too, where he gets superpowers and then he has his tragic backstory.
Yeah.
Here, he gets to keep both of his parents, but his father is uber flawed.
Oh, and that's what his dad.
But he's got problems. They play him up almost as a racist because of the mutant thing.
Yeah. Which is really interesting, and I think that's another thing where Bendis is sort of, I don't know, it's sort of what you were talking about before, where he doesn't concentrate on the races of people. Like, typically, if this was a thing where they were just playing the race card to get sales, the black father wouldn't be the racist guy.
No, that's right.
And I think that's just a credit, again, to how three-dimensionally made these characters is he gives them these little things about them, these little flaws that sort of, I mean, that's one of the things that sort of defines the father's character, is the fact that he feels like everyone needs to be responsible for themselves, and that will solve people's problems. Like, if people were just responsible for themselves, took responsibility for all their own problems, superheroes wouldn't be needed, and that's kind of what bothers him.
Yeah, sure. That's right.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the thing he's trying to teach Miles, and the mother is sort of contradictory to that, which I really like, too. She's a lot of fun.
What do you think of Miles's roommate?
I think he's really funny.
'Cause he gets a lot of panel time to not talk about.
Yeah, yeah, he does. He looks like the little kid from Up. I realized when I was reading this. That was one of the immediate things that struck me when I was rereading it. I didn't notice it the first time, but
that's hilarious.
He's sort of like the anti-Harry Osborn in a lot of ways, which again is sort of playing the whole opposite of the Spider-Man thing, where Peter's best friend was this rich kid. He got into drugs. He was the cool guy on the block, whereas Miles's friend is the complete opposite. He's a Lego nerd. He's fat. he doesn't.
I've never seen his name before. How do you pronounce his name?
I think it was Gank, but I'm not.
See, I don't know if it's Gank or Gonky. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. And by the way, how hilarious are his T-shirts?
Oh yeah, you're right. He has a Howard the Duck shirt.
Yeah, I thought that was really clever. But I think he's really funny because he sort of reminded me of like. He was sort of like Microchip if he was Miles' age. Like, he's just this kid that's trying to provide for a superhero, but he's way in over his head and doesn't know what he's doing, which I thought was really funny. Like, when he buys Miles the Halloween costume, he's like, yeah, I spent $80 on this. I wore it last year.
Yeah, like, I didn't just buy it for you. I wore it last year. and then Miles goes, wait, you bought an $80 costume to get $10 of candy?
Yeah.
Like, there's some great moments of comedy in this.
Yeah.
And there ought to be. They're 13-year-olds.
Right. Exactly. What do you?
I can tell you, I saw that kid as, I didn't think of Microchip, but that's great, and I think that's better than what I was thinking of. Mm-hmm. But maybe he's a bit of a cross of Microchip and Foggy Nelson.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good comparison as well.
Because I was getting more like if Peter Parker had a Foggy Nelson, because he doesn't really mirror anybody in regular Spider-Man except for maybe Harry Osborn, like you said. But I mean, I can't see this guy turning into like a supervillain or anything.
Right.
Like, he's definitely, like you said, kind of the anti-Harry Osborn, which is good because Miles has enough like really flawed problem people around him.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, he needs the kid that's just kind of fun and adds some levity, but also helps him out some. I mean, not anywhere beyond doing the occasional Google search, but I mean, like, I bought you this movie and it shows Spider-Man doing things.
Yeah. That's
how I'm gonna train you.
Yeah, see, like, I feel like when this kid grows up, he like, if this book continues or they do like a Miles in the future thing, like, Gank would be like the guy like sitting in Miles' version of the Batcave, like looking up stuff for him, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Playing with Legos.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into criticism, shall we? Because we've talked mostly about things we like, and I think we've covered the human stuff quite a bit. In a half hour, but there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot in this. And what's really neat is, as slow as it felt reading it month to month, there's a lot in this. I don't feel like I gave it nearly enough credit month to month.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good setup in here where they set up ongoing mysteries, like especially about the father and his past. That's something that I'm really interested to learn as we're going forward, that he's sort of been feeding to us little by little throughout the issues.
What would you say is your biggest problem or concern with this?
My biggest concern, I don't really, maybe the inconsistency of the art on the book.
That's what I was going to say. I don't like the fill-in artist.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Samnee did a 2-issue fill-in here.
Yes, and it didn't work for me at all.
I normally love Chris Samnee. Like, the stuff he's doing with Daredevil right now, fantastic. But
I think the problem is it just doesn't work with this. We had 6 issues from Pacelli.
Yeah, it's just such a stark contrast, and the other artist that they got is really good at aping Pacelli, I think. Marquez. At least his art, or his or her art style looks pretty similar to me.
Yeah, I don't know who that is, but you're right. It's a lot. In fact, I forgot that wasn't the same person. So
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. But that was the one thing that I'd probably have to complain about. I mean, I can't, but even still, like, the storytelling was well done, even in those 2 issues. I mean, I think the lineup, the artists they have on here is talented. I'd just like to see someone, like after Pacelli gets done with Spider-Man, I hope that she stays with this for a while.
I wouldn't have minded Samney as much if he'd been on the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, just because like you said, I mean, I like it on Daredevil.
Right.
Although I think that this wants something more kind of dynamic than that.
Yeah.
This kind of screams, which is weird because you're right. I mean, he's somewhat of an urban character, but I think it wants to be polished. I don't know why I think that. Maybe just because Ultimate has generally been a really polished looking book.
Yeah. Plus, it's sort of like these. Like, if you think about the lineup of artists that have been on these, like, Ultimate books, and not even just this one. I mean, you look at, like, Mark Bagley, Stuart Immonen, Pacelli, Marquez, like, they're all, like, really clean, sort of people that draw, like, well, not Bagley as much, he's a little bit more cartoony, but there's sort of, like, a realism to their artwork where Samney's just pure cartooning.
Mm-hmm.
He's just cartoony, out there, awesome kind of stuff. And I just, like I said, I like him normally, but I just don't think it fit the string of artists that we've had on this book for a long time. But,
yeah, it just wasn't the right match.
Yeah.
I have kind of a small gripe, or I don't know. It's I don't know what it is with me and Spider-Man and costumes.
Yeah.
But this is yet another one of those things like I'm always complaining about with the movies where they don't explain the costume well enough. Okay, so we know it comes from Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
No problem there. My complaint is, did Nick Fury really break into Miles Morales' room and steal his drawing?
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
I'm calling a foul on that one. Because we saw Miles designing the costume.
Yeah, that's true.
And it makes me wonder if Bendis had decided yet how exactly he was going to get it when he had him draw that, because I don't think he thought that one through.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even catch that. That's a good catch.
I caught it this time. I didn't catch it the first time around, but this time I was just, I read it all together, and I was just like, wait a minute. He brings him that costume, and it was the exact same design that he designed, and I thought that was really silly.
I wouldn't put it past Nick Fury to be surveying Miles at all times to make sure he's not doing anything stupid.
Maybe so, but we needed to have been told that.
Right, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't put it past that character, but you're right. The fact that they didn't explain it is a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a big deal, but I just thought it was weird. I was like, really? All right.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't have a lot of big problems with it. Like I said, my biggest complaint while reading it was that it doesn't read great month to month. What are you going to do? When you buy them all, you're probably not going to read it month to month. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But I gotta say, there are some books that I find myself considering dropping just because I'm not into it in the month to month way that I usually read. And, it's difficult to say whether or not I should consider that a criticism, because the problem is I did consider dropping this about midway through.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just because if I find myself thinking, oh God, I've got to go back and reread all of this to catch up to where I am, I think about filling the slot on my pull list because I buy a lot of books.
Right.
And but it's just kind of a personal thing because it's just like Ninja Turtles going back. I'm like, wow, I'm glad I bought all of this because it's great together. I'm enjoying the out of it.
Yeah,
so
I can understand that. I mean, and this is the sort of book where, I mean, Bendis is a big name creator, but it's like you could get Amazing Spider-Man. Like, not that book's good or anything, but like...
Speaking of books I'm considering dropping.
But like, if you're like a reader walking into the store for the first time looking for a Spider-Man comic, you get the one that says The Amazing Spider-Man that has Peter Parker in his regular costume on the cover. You could get Avenging Spider-Man that has Peter Parker in his regular costume on the cover, the one that you're familiar with. Or you could get the $4 one that says Ultimate Comics Ultimate All New Spider-Man. That's $4. With a kid that's African American and Hispanic, and you have no idea who he is. He's got a different costume. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I would love to see a poll to see how many kids were actually reading this. I mean, because naturally kids don't read a lot of comics anymore anyway. It seems like, but I mean, ironically, in a lot of ways, it seems like this would be kind of a pretty good kid-friendly book considering he's 13. Although I gotta tell you, There are some sort of graphic panels in this, considering we got a 13-year-old in the costume.
There's a lot of swearing that they bleeped out in here too.
The thing that I noticed the most was when Scorpion had all those blades in his face.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I was sitting here thinking, I'm not sure we're thinking this through when we got a 13-year-old in the costume. I mean, wouldn't it be funny if this got so graphic that they had to put a parental a parental warning on the front of it?
That'd be really ironic.
We don't want 13-year-olds reading our book about a 13-year-old. Well, I guess Kick-Ass kind of had that.
That's sort of the problem I have with a lot of the mainstream superhero books, but that's...
I don't mean to be preachy about it. I just... Yeah. This more than anything else right now is a book that I feel like you ought to be able to give to an 8 or 9-year-old.
Right. I mean, in theory, you should be able to give any of their books to a 13-year-old that's if it's one of their main titles like Spider-Man or something, but, that's not the way it is anymore.
No, it's not. But once again, you put a 13-year-old in the suit, and it feels a little bit weird that it's kind of graphic.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, but it didn't really surprise me because it's Ultimate, you know what I mean?
Well, fair enough, and again, I'm not used to Ultimate, and as I have gone back, I've realized, oh yeah, it is kind of like that, so... and again, nothing against it. I mean, it's great. I'm not complaining about violence in comic books. I just, again, I'd like to hand this to a kid. I got one more thing I want to ask you about before we quit. We're already into 40 minutes.
Sure.
Let me ask you this. How do you feel about the crossover event and the way that Bendis is winding that into the normal, into the regular story he's telling?
I've enjoyed it because I didn't have to read the Ultimates. I understand what was going on, and that's a book I do not want to read. Not because it's not good. It's just I don't know. I've never read any Ultimates before. The premise of it doesn't interest me, and I just don't really care. So the fact that I could continue to read Ultimate Spider-Man, which is a book I really like, and not have to read every part of the event, it's really nice.
I really liked that too. I also thought that they were really smart when they brought Captain America in to bring readers up to speed that hadn't read the Death of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
On the fact that Cap was involved in that.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see how that confrontation plays out, especially with the other people they have in the room at the end of that cliffhanger.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they're doing that. I'm glad they've got that Ant-Man and Gwen are there. I mean, I like that. I like they've been using them really sparingly, but in important, key ways.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though. I thought that they were gonna do that whole Aunt May and Gwen thing in the Spider-Man book because I knew that Peter Parker was gonna have some sort of confrontation with them.
Well, that would have been nice.
But I don't know. I'm kind of glad they're doing it in here, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hey, we should review that when it's done.
We should. Hopefully hopefully we enjoy it more once it's finished.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You think it could possibly fix itself in 2 issues?
I don't know.
I hate to be judgmental, but I haven't enjoyed that at all.
Yeah.
So far.
I haven't really enjoyed it too much either, but when it comes to Ultimate Spider-Man things, like in Bendis, I trust most of the time because Ultimate Spider-Man is one of those books where I know every month I pick it up, and it's been going on for, 10 years plus now? I mean, it's been good consistently for 10 plus years, so.
Yeah.
I don't know. The one thing I wanted to mention before we go that I really liked about this book was I thought it was really cool to have Miles fighting throwaway villains.
Yeah.
Like Omega Red and Batroc the Leaper and the Ringer. That was awesome. Just to get him, to ease him in before we bring in the real big bad guys. Well, we had Scorpion and Prowler in there, but I like that he had a learning curve and he could fight some of the villains that we don't see too often.
Can I ask you a question? Was Prowler in this prior to this?
I don't think so.
Okay. It would have almost been kind of neat had he been.
Yeah, that would have been.
If it had been like we didn't know his secret identity, and then all at once they just played it like oh, and here's the secret identity because it's the new book,
Yeah, I mean, I might be wrong because it's been a while since I've read the Ultimate trades, but as far as I'm aware right now, I don't think so. I mean, I know there was an Ultimate version of the Scorpion before, and this is a new version. It's just a different character, also named Scorpion. So.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that because I didn't think that this guy had been here before. And Ultimate is taking me a little bit to get used to because they don't seem to have, because it's not the 616 universe, they don't seem to mind at all just killing off people in this.
Yeah.
Like, just the Tinkerer, gone. There he goes. And I didn't expect that. I was like, and he's gone.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed.
It's unpredictable.
Tinker is awesome.
He was cool, but...
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have to say about this.
Me too. The only other thing I have to say is I think the costume looks cool. I think the design is awesome.
I like the costume as well. I think this is the first book I've ever read where I saw 5 covers before he actually put the costume on. Which is not a complaint against the book. I get why you'd want to put the costume on the cover.
Yeah.
I'm not begrudging that at all. And I also understand why you wouldn't want to put him in the Halloween costume on the cover.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, you're right. I think the costume looks great, and like I said, I'm really surprised at how much more I enjoyed this reading it all together. Dan, thanks a lot as always for reviewing Spider-Man with me.
Oh, no problem, dude.
I've gotten to where I nearly skip everything Spider-Man until you come along, for you are our resident Spider-Man expert.
Oh, well, thanks. I just like to read Spider-Man. I don't know.
By the way, did you see that I bought and reviewed the Thanos copter?
No, that's awesome. No.
Yeah, it's up right now. You sent me pictures of the Thanos copter issue, and I went on eBay and bought a copy and just did a vault on it this week.
That's awesome. How was it?
It's hilarious. We'll talk in a second.
Okay.
Well, anyway, thanks everybody for watching the Comic Book Vault, and once again, thanks as always to Dan for being here with me. If you ever have anything you'd like to see me or Vince review on the Comic Book Vault, you can always send it to our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285, and we'll see you next time. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Dan.
And see ya.
Bye, guys.